You're watching Wild About Arizona, the official podcast of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Here's your host, Michael Coliani.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. The Mexican wolf is an endangered subspecies of gray wolf found in Arizona, as well as New Mexico and Mexico. By 1980, Mexican wolves were completely eliminated from the wild, but a breeding program based off 7 captive wolves enabled Mexican wolves to be reintroduced into Arizona and New Mexico in 1998. Since that time, the Mexican wolf population has grown and expanded. Recently, the Arizona Game and Fish Department collaborated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to examine how inbreeding might be affecting the Mexican wolf population. Today, we will discuss the results of this research with Matt Clement, a biometrician with the Arizona Game and Fish Department and lead author of a recent publication on inbreeding in Mexican wolves. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Matt, first off, if we could just jump into this, can you tell us a little bit about Mexican wolves and their recent history here in the area?
Sure, yeah. So Mexican wolves are a subspecies of gray wolf. So they're, related to wolves all around the world. But they're a little distinctive. One thing that stands out about Mexican wolves is they're quite small. Mm-hmm. So the adults only weigh about 50 to 60 pounds, whereas like in Alaska, a wolf could be over 100 pounds. And so historically, Mexican wolves were found in, as you said in the introduction, in the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico, mm-hmm. and in adjoining parts of the U.S. Southwest, so Arizona and New Mexico. And like other wolves, other predators, as Europeans settled North America, they saw wolves as a threat to their livestock and to their personal safety. Mm-hmm. So for a long time, there were campaigns to eliminate wolves from the landscape. They were seen as a nuisance. And so, for a long time, there were government programs to kill them, and the population declined tremendously over the years. And so in 1976, the subspecies was listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. Mm-hmm. And we believe that by 1980, there were no Mexican wolves in the wild anywhere. But the species was not extinct because there were captive animals in zoos and places like that. And so based on just 7 animals, the zoos developed a captive breeding program. And so between 1980 and 1998, they were breeding wolves, trying to increase the population. And in 1998, we had a great success and were able to release the animals back into the wild. And we've had a wild population since then.
Mm. And that's just such an incredible stat that a species can recover from just 7 original wolves. Very interesting. So if that population is indeed growing, what are some of those primary concerns that we have for the population?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, and you highlighted, this population is growing from just 7 founders. Mm-hmm. So all of these animals are very closely related. So that means they're all highly inbred. And so that's one of the major concerns, just the level of inbreeding that mm-hmm. we see in that population. In fact, so the average Mexican wolf is about as inbred as if you had a brother and sister mate and their offspring would be inbred.
Sure.
That's basically every Mexican wolf is like those offspring.
Mm-hmm. So they're like maybe some of the royal families of old that we were discussing before we jumped on this. So I think most people really have a basic understanding of inbreeding, right? But can you lay out for us what inbreeding is and why we're concerned about it?
Yeah, so inbreeding occurs when 2 closely related individuals breed and have offspring. And so if I can get a little nerdy here.
Please.
Like all of us have DNA, and that gives, instructions for how you grow your body. And DNA, of course, is made up of genes, which are little inheritable pieces of DNA. And each one of us has 2 copies of each gene. Mm-hmm. And these copies are called alleles. And the 2 copies mean you get one from your mother and one from your father. And so that's why, you'll hear people say like, oh, you have your mother's eyes and you have your father's nose, because we're a blend of those two parents. And so you have these two different copies, and that's useful for a lot of reasons. One reason is that, in a person, you have tens of thousands of genes, and some of those, in every single one of us, some of those are going to be defective. It's just the way it is, right? Too much sun exposure or whatever. And so some gene that codes to build some protein that you need to like digest your food or whatever it is,
Sure.
yours might be, you might have a copy that's a little wonky, but you have two copies. So that second copy can sort of hide the problems in the first copy. And so when you have two different copies like that, you're called a heterozygote. What happens then with inbreeding is, you have a brother and sister, they may share the same genes, and they may both have that same defective copy, right? They might both fail to make that protein. And then when they breed, their offspring are then getting the exact same defective gene from each parent. And so now that offspring is called a homozygote because they have the same gene two times.
Sure.
And so now that offspring, they have this defective gene, they're not making this protein, they're not extracting energy from their food, and so they're not as healthy because of that.
Okay. And that can lead to possibly some deformities and things like that, right? Are there things that we see in some of these animals like that?
Yeah, I mean, it can. So there's almost no end to, what could happen, because every single gene in your body potentially could be affected. But sometimes you will see really dramatic things. You can have, deformed spine. Teeth are really important to the survival of animals, and you can see that where animals have the wrong number of teeth or they're in the wrong place. I actually have 31 teeth instead of 32, and so does my mother, so I inherited that from her. And if you ask around your friends, you might find that it's not that rare to have an extra tooth or a missing tooth. Or,
small variations, right?
Right, yeah, all of us are a little bit different. And so you may see these deformities. The Florida panther is known for having cowlicks, so they have weird hair growth patterns because they're inbred.
Sure.
And a kinked tail is another thing the Florida panther is known for. Their tail, instead of being all pretty and straight, it's got like this weird bend in it. But it can also be different things that are not visible. So there could just be some protein you can't develop. There could be a low sperm count, that you're not going to see when a wolf or another animal's walking by, but it could be present. So there are all kinds of things that could happen, with inbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I also want to mention, though, that inbreeding is not strictly bad or not bad in every case. So there's definitely this potential for these bad genes to be expressed. But sort of a counterexample is you might look at domestic animals and breeders. And breeders will intentionally inbreed their animals because they have some animal that they're happy with.
Mm-hmm. Has a certain trait
that
they want to see continued.
Exactly. It's extra beautiful, it's extra tall, it's producing lots of milk, whatever it is, and they want the offspring to have that same trait. And so breeders will intentionally inbreed their animals to isolate these good traits as well. So it is, inbreeding is concerning because there's this definitely a potential for bad traits to be accented,
mm-hmm.
but there is actually also a potential for good traits to be accented. So it's it's an interesting It's an interesting process, I guess.
Yeah, an interesting dynamic, right? That you got to take the good with the bad, and vice versa. Do we see these types of problems, like you kind of mentioned, like deformed spines, things like that, in Mexican wolves specifically?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So with Mexican wolves, the short answer is no, we don't see that. And Mexican wolves, because they're endangered, are monitored quite closely. There's still a captive breeding program, so there's a huge number of these animals are in captivity, and they are seen every day. They're seen by vets, and if they were horribly deformed, that would be seen. But the captive animals also are monitored. I might have said captive animals. I meant the wild animals are also monitored pretty closely. And so they will, every year, they'll make an effort to capture animals, to put radio collars on them so that we can follow them. And when they're captured, they get a vet check. And so we're not seeing the evidence of like gross, obvious deformities where you'd be very concerned about the species.
Sure.
Now, having said that, there are things like I said, potentially a low sperm count. You're not going to see just because, from a external examination.
Yeah.
But for the type of thing you can see from an external observation, we're not seeing those types of problems, which is definitely good news for the species.
Yeah, very encouraging. And actually, I had the pleasure of getting to go out on our Mexican wolf count this year and document some of that process of the animals getting vet checks and things like that. It was just fascinating work. Speaking of fascinating work, you were recently the lead author on a paper about inbreeding in Mexican wolves, right? Part of the reason we have you on here today. But it didn't discuss any of those deformities that we were just discussing. Can you tell us a little bit how you examine the impact of breeding in your paper?
Yeah, so the deformities, right? When inbreeding happens to an individual, and that individual, may or may not be affected, potentially, theoretically, a deformity. But at the Arizona Game and Fish Department, we're really worried about the population, the overall. And how is the population doing? And so another thing with something like a deformity is, I've said a couple times, if there's a low sperm count, we can't see that very well. Or if there's something like teeth, right? I said a minute ago, I have 31 teeth instead of 32, but it's only, if that happens to a wolf, that might be a sign of inbreeding, but it's only important if it actually is affecting the wolf's ability to survive or reproduce.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. So if a wolf has one fewer tooth, but it's still killing prey, it may be a sign of inbreeding, but it may not be a problem or something that we're really concerned about. So what we did, instead of looking at deformities, was we looked at survival and reproduction, because that's what's really important to the population. Are these animals surviving? Are they reproducing? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we focused on. And so there's a team called the Interagency Field Team, and it's made up of Arizona Game and Fish Department, the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Wildlife Services, which is another federal agency, and the White Mountain Apache Tribe. Mm-hmm. And so they are doing, tons of great work in the field. The work that you observed earlier, where they're capturing these animals and they're monitoring the reproduction. They'll go into dens and see how many pups have been produced, and they radio track animals, and they do this big year-end count to count how many animals there are. And so that was like the source of our data. The data on reproduction and survival is from all the field work the Interagency Field Team does. Mm-hmm. And so that's the metric we used. Nothing, about deformities. It was, are they reproducing? Are they surviving?
Okay.
And so the approach we used was we looked at inbreeding, right? And the way we measure inbreeding is actually, it's the same way like breeders, dog breeders or farmers do, is they construct this family tree. And so, two wolves reproduce and have young, and because they're so closely monitored, like we know who's the parent to whom. And we know these two wolves are second cousins, and now they're breeding. So we know there's some level of inbreeding. And so, again, it's just following that family tree is how we estimate something. It's called the inbreeding coefficient. And that's a measure of, on average, how many genes will these two share based on their ancestry.
Okay.
And so we measure inbreeding, and some of the wolves are more inbred and some of them are less inbred. And so we look, are the ones that are more inbred, are they having smaller litters? Are those litters failing to survive? And if so, that would indicate, there would be evidence perhaps that inbreeding is impacting this population, right? So you could imagine some of the wolves are extra inbred and some are a little less inbred. And hypothetically, the more inbred ones are having fewer pups. And so that would be a concern for the population. And it would also be a concern because through time, as this inbred population breeds, that the inbreeding can get worse, unfortunately. And so if the inbred ones are having trouble reproducing and the population becomes more inbred, the future in that scenario would start to look concerning. And so that was our approach. That was our question. Within the population, are the more inbred animals producing as many pups? Are they surviving as well compared to the less inbred animals in the same population?
And what did you guys come up with in the end? Did that have any effect on the viability of the overall species?
Right. So the results were basically relatively good news for the population. We were not seeing major inbreeding depression. So inbreeding means the related animals are breeding, and we did see inbreeding. But inbreeding depression means that it's harming the population. And we really did not see that. Even the animals that were relatively inbred, they still produced pups, and they still produced a good number. The average litter size we were seeing was about 5 pups. And if you compare that to other gray wolf populations around the world, that's basically pretty normal, which is great news.
Sure.
And then we were also looking at, because it's one thing to produce a pup, but it's another thing to, feed and protect that young, vulnerable animal. It needs to survive those, childhood diseases that everyone gets exposed to. And so what the IFT does, the field people, is 9 months after the pups are born, they do a survey and see, how many have survived. And again, we were seeing, regardless of the amount of inbreeding, we were seeing good survival across the board. So in this situation, like I said, it was good news. We were not seeing really detectable amount of inbreeding depression.
And that's exactly what we're looking for, right? So the implications of this research is pretty positive.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, it's the implications of the research, are that we're not seeing inbreeding depression, that the animals are reproducing and surviving, despite being significantly inbred. And it does sort of make sense, because what we've seen, even without the analysis, is a population that's growing rapidly. Since 2010, the population is growing over 13% per year, which, right, like if your retirement portfolio is growing 13% per year, you'd be
feeling pretty good about
pretty happy about that. So it's over 13% per year. Since 2010, that's well over 400% population growth. There is a recovery plan for this species, and we set out benchmarks that, we hope the population will be growing through time, and the population has shot past that. It's growing much faster than that. We've now had 9 consecutive years of population growth, despite recent drought and just all the, these are wild animals that have to kill their prey and defend a territory and deal with, humans, right? Car accidents
and roads and all those sorts of things.
All of those challenges. But yeah, they're still growing over 13% per year. So all of that's really heartening, really positive, really optimistic for this population.
Very exciting. Is this groundbreaking research? Is this the first study of this type? I mean, how does this compare to any previous research that's similar?
Yeah, so it is not the first time people studied Mexican wolves. They're an endangered subspecies, so there's been a lot of scientific interest in them for a lot of years. And so one study that comes to mind, it was published in 1999, and so this was looking at the period when these wolves only existed in captivity, right, up until 1998. And it was finding in captivity that they were still having good litter size and good survival, even the more inbred animals. There was another study in 2002, again focused on the captive animals. It did say that the more inbred animals had smaller body size. And that could potentially, at that time they were concerned that might mean they're less able to kill prey, that type of thing. So they did find a difference. One of the more significant studies, I'm remembering, there was a study in 2007, again focused on the captive animals, that said it did find a lower sperm count in the more inbred animals. And one of the more significant ones, there's a paper in 2007 published by Fredrickson et al., and they were looking at wild wolves, and they found that when the pups were more inbred, that the litters were smaller. And so, that was an interesting result, an important result, and, that has, fed concerns about inbreeding because they were finding this effect. And then we found this pretty different effect, that we weren't seeing that the litter sizes were still good. And I think part of what was going on was that study was done in 2007, and in those initial years that the Mexican wolves were living in the wild, the population was really small. There was only a handful of litters every year. So that study was based on 39 litters, which is, a smaller sample size. And there's nothing, when you have a rare species, that's sometimes how it goes. You have a small sample size. But in our study, because it's now 2025 and the population's much bigger, there's more years to study, and each year there's more and more litters. So we had something like 350 litters instead of 39 litters. And so with that much larger sample size, we were not seeing that same effect. And so part of their result may have been due to that smaller sample size. Another thing is, in those early years, those wolves were raised in captivity and released, whereas in 2025, these wolves are pretty wild. I mean, they were born in the wild, their parents were born in the wild, their grandparents were born in the wild, so we could consider these wild animals. And so, that's another difference between the data we had and the data that was published in 2007. So yeah, and it has been a while since a paper of this nature has been published. So I think it's really important to update, and just, the much bigger sample size, and it's the latest results.
So what does that mean for just inbreeding as a general problem? Is it something that we're not too concerned about, or what's your feeling at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, our results were good news for sure, but the population is still inbred, and that does still, anytime you have like this lower genetic diversity, there's potential for problems. And so, Arizona Game and Fish Department continues to take inbreeding seriously. We're not, dismissing it as a problem. We continue to monitor the population. We continue to monitor the levels of inbreeding. We're looking to use newer techniques. For example, I said how the way we estimated inbreeding was looking at the pedigree, the family tree, so it's kind of pencil and paper, who's related to who. But of course, there are genetic tests that you can use now, right, to more precisely quantify how related animals are. And so we've been developing tissue banks, to enable that sort of work in the future. It's also something I've mentioned. So there is a recovery plan for this species, and the recovery plan says that we will continue to monitor the genetic diversity is the metric in the recovery plan. And so we're looking, are we retaining the gene diversity that's still there? We don't want to see those loss of genes or genetic diversity. So we continue to take it seriously. Another really important thing the department is doing is we have a foster pup program. And so what we do here, right, is there's actually two populations. There's the wild population and there's the captive population. And so what we do is from the captive population, and this is collaborative, it's not just the Arizona Game and Fish Department, but
Right.
What we do is within the captive population, we find that the individual pups that have the highest level of gene diversity and that are least related to the wild animals. And we have a foster program where when a wild pair has a litter, they will then go out hunting, and a team of biologists will sneak into the den and just place an extra pup in there and then sneak back out.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news for us is Mexican wolves can't count. And so they come back to the den and there's an extra pup or two in there, and they just are happy to raise those pups as their own. But when we do that, that's a tool we can use to increase the level of genetic diversity in the population. And so that's something that we've been doing since around 2016. And we've placed over 100 foster pups into the wild.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's been something we've done. Again, we're not just sort of setting the wolves free and hoping for the best. We're working actively to try and improve their chances.
So that's kind of one of the tools that we use to, like you said, increase genetic diversity, reduce inbreeding. Are there any other techniques that we employ to do that?
Yeah, so that's foster pups is probably the most successful thing we've been doing. There are other things that are sometimes done, translocations. I think there have been a few cases where, like, a brother and sister look like they want to breed, and we'll intervene to split them up to try and prevent them from breeding. We can move animals around, again, to sort of like separate closely related animals and get less closely related animals just in proximity to each other, so they might choose to breed. But that includes risks, right? You move an adult wolf to a new location, it may be killed by other wolves. It may, just have trouble adapting to this new location. It's not its home, familiar area. Whereas the foster pups has been very smooth. The parents accept the pups and then they're raised as wild animals. So that's been really successful. Another thing that can be done is to release adult wolves into the wild, and certainly, like in 1998, that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
There were zero wolves in the wild, and so we released captive adults. We've moved away from that because, again, partly because the foster program is so smooth, and partly because when you release captive adults, right, these are animals that were raised in captivity. They're not fully wild, and so we've found that There can be problems with that. They can be killed by other wolves. They may have difficulty hunting successfully. They may be attracted to humans and then cause problems. And so that's something that, we have done in the past, but we've really moved away from.
Sure, it just affects survival rate, I'd assume, putting an adult out on the landscape that just doesn't have the necessary skills to survive like the wild ones would.
Yeah, I mean, the data shows they have a lower survival rate, and I think that's even more true now, right? Like early on, at least those initial releases weren't competing with wild wolves. They had to learn to survive, but they weren't competing directly against, hardened, hardy, crafty
truly wild
wolves. But if we did that today, then that would be an issue.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how do you think that these results that sound pretty generally positive, how are they kind of affecting the management of the species overall?
Yeah, I mean, they inform management decisions. I mean, I would say, one thing is again, the foster pups that I was just talking about. It just seems to be evidence that program's been really successful. So I think these results are a sign that we should continue with the foster pup program. Another thing, though, is because the population is doing so well, it's been growing so well, I think it's a sign that we should be careful about trying like radical interventions. One specific thing is breeding with other subspecies. So, right, Mexican wolves are a subspecies of gray wolf. And so if you put another gray wolf, like a northern gray wolf and a Mexican wolf together, they are capable of having offspring. And those offspring would be much less inbred, right? You'd be bringing in a wolf that has no relation to Mexican wolves. And so at times we've seen people advocating for that. Let's do that and they'll be less inbred. There are big concerns about that, though. One thing is just, right, Mexican wolves are part of, our heritage in the Southwest, and they've adapted to the Southwest, and, they're different from other wolves. And so if you breed a Mexican wolf with a different gray wolf, what's left is not really a pure Mexican wolf anymore. So you're losing that history. And so, one of our goals is for this to be a distinct Southwestern type of wolf. And so, we'd like to avoid interbreeding with that, like that. And it's not just about history or heritage. We talked about inbreeding depression. There's a term, outbreeding depression. And what can happen, theoretically, is, right, you have an animal that is bred to survive in a certain environment, and then you bring in genes that evolved in a different environment, and those new foreign genes, may be less adaptive, less successful in this Southwestern environment. And so, I mean, I'm speculating a little bit, but bringing in those types of genes, at least theoretically, could reduce the fitness of our wolves and harm them. And so doing something like that, is a gamble.
Sure.
And, sure, there are potential benefits, but we definitely have concerns about potential negative consequences. And so, with the results that we're getting, that the population is thriving, and we are not, it's been over 25 years of reproduction or, reintroduction, and we're not seeing really evidence of a genetic problem. And so, I think that is evidence when you're weighing the pros and the cons of bringing in a different subspecies. the results that we're seeing suggest maybe that it's too risky to do something like that.
So, Matt, it sounds like there's a lot of really positive news about the population and the fact that it's growing, pretty healthily. What are some of the latest numbers that we've gotten from the Mexican wolf count that I was able to be a part of in January?
Yeah, so the numbers from that January count are out now, and so the minimum count, the minimum number of wolves is 286, and that is combining Arizona and New Mexico. And there's a much smaller number in Mexico itself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, 286, it's the highest number we've ever seen. The population has grown for 9 straight years, which is really great. And I think I mentioned earlier, the growth is over 13% per year on average. So yeah, I mean, those numbers are really great to see.
Really exciting. And I know that there's going to be a lot more research to come. So if people are just more interested in getting down into the nitty-gritty of this, where can they find your paper and your research?
Yeah, so this paper was published, we've been talking about it, was published a few months ago. It was published in the Journal of Wildlife Management, and it is freely and publicly available. There's not like a paywall on this article or anything. And yeah, it can be found online. And so I'm hoping, maybe we can provide a URL on the screen or something, or a link where people can read it if they're interested in all the details.
Absolutely. Gosh, it's just so exciting to see this population go from just 7 captive animals to what it is today, and hopefully continue to see it flourish into the future. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast, and we're looking forward to learning more.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Visit us online at www.azgfd.gov.